Hi, I'm Nadia.
Hi, I'm Aaleia.
Hi, I'm Nameera.
And this is Operation Tomatometer.
So, today we have a fun episode for all of you guys. And in case you haven't heard of it, or if you've been living in a ghost town,
Oh gosh,
we will be reviewing the Ghostbusters Afterlife film.
Now, with our weekly segment of Rotten or Not, where we put our heads together to figure out what the critics back at Rotten Tomatoes have come up with for this film.
So, what are our guesses for what the critics rated this film?
Okay, so initially walking out of the theater, like in the hype of it, I was in the mood of giving it in the 90s, but now I'm, settling with it. I think like an 88 I would give the film.
I actually think that it's a little lower, maybe more around 70, because I feel like some critics who maybe grew up with the film might not have been very happy with some of the things that they did. Some people might have been happier with the nostalgia value. Others might have been disappointed that they didn't take their own original take on it and that it was maybe too similar in plot.
I might go a little bit lower than you.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna relax at a nice 65. And here's my reason why. I did not grow up watching Ghostbusters like all that intently. I know of the premise and whatnot, but like the nostalgia value and like the fan servicing wasn't just cutting it for me. I just purely was focusing on my experience and how I felt afterwards. So 65. I feel like critics, though, they may have appreciated it a little bit more, or maybe they thought it didn't live up to the standard. Those are all plausible opportunities there, but
yeah, there's a lot of play with a movie of this caliber, and like it's a classic.
Yeah.
And like Aaleia was saying, you have this nostalgia value and this whole fan base. To live up to their expectations when you're going into it. So I think unlike you, Nameera, I think because I did watch the films with my mom and sister when I was younger, I think I went into the film with like different expectations and a different foundation. So I was going into it looking for like original, like from the original movies, looking for like those nods and stuff. It was kind of hard for me to just isolate it and look at it on its own as a film.
Well, I saw the 1984 one more recently, and I remember it was a little strange watching it because it was like, this is not a normal science fiction film. But this one, I feel like it didn't have what was originally weird to me, but now I kind of admire that, is that sort of self-aware silliness that the original had. Like, you even notice like some of the characters, they were kind of unfazed by a lot of the magic that was happening, and it lost that aspect for me. So I can understand why you gave it a lower score. But now let's see what the critics did give it.
Oh, really? What?
wow.
My guessing game is not.
I mean, you were really close on that.
What did I say?
Wait, what was your guess again? It
65.
was 60. Oh. This is for Nameera's head.
Yeah.
Oh, we all like. I'm making this a game, but we all won at some point.
So
Well.
I am not that surprised.
I would say to a certain extent I am not surprised as well, but then again to another extent I'm also surprised because I didn't think. Not that 65 rated movies are bad, per se, but I just wasn't expecting it to be, like, that low. Not that that's, like, insanely low, like last week, but yeah, at 65, I can see the flaws in the movie, but I think generally I still can say I liked it, and I think, but, 65 is close to 80, I guess. listen, Nameera. Me trying to give myself some credit. I was close, guys. I was really close.
Close. Yeah.
Yeah. My guessing skills.
Very close. I think that Nameera and I both think that there was room for criticism here.
Yeah.
I think they were somewhat justified in giving it a low score. Maybe not that low.
Yeah.
Because there was nostalgia about it. They did try. And it was actually really good, and it was very heartfelt.
Yeah.
And in some points, it was a really good film. But there were some things that I can understand why they didn't give it a higher score.
Yeah, like personally, my feeling after leaving the theater was that like it wasn't very standout to me, and I feel like something that's like taking on, say, like the Ghostbuster name, like kind of has to like put in that extra effort. I feel like there was a very sincere effort put in, but was it enough? Not to me, at least.
I have to say that I think we also should just acknowledge like the expectations. Like I said earlier, the expectations we went into the movie with. Like I said, I went in with low expectations because with all the sequels that come out recently and the remakes, adaptations, I kind of have just been done with it. So when I saw a Ghostbusters sequel was coming out, I wasn't so eager to see it. But then coming out of it, I was, seeing all the 4 original members of the Ghostbusters. That already was enough for me. So that was great. And just, all the nostalgia that we saw in the movie, I think those were definitely pluses in the film.
I actually didn't go into it with low expectations. I don't think I had any expectations, honestly. I went into it like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go see this movie. And, I mean, it wasn't as good as the original in terms of, like, the surprise and the magic and everything.
I mean,
but
of course, nothing beats the original, right?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah, I just feel like the plot was really, like, lackluster, I feel.
A little bit. And that goes into the whole nostalgia thing, too.
Right.
I mean, the main climactic villain in this sequel is a villain we have seen before in the previous Ghostbuster movies.
Right.
So I guess in that sense, you are right. It definitely didn't bring too much to the table that was different, so I can definitely see your point in that.
So do we think that did it live up to the fan expectations from a nostalgia standpoint? Because it did bring back a lot of characters. I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting, like, you went into it knowing that there were going to be the original Ghostbusters, and
I actually didn't know. Well, I knew that one at least, but I wasn't sure that all of them would
How'd
come
you
back.
know?
The trailer.
What are your secrets?
Oh,
yeah.
You gotta watch the trailer, guys.
I didn't see the trailer. I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, which actually that's a good thing because sometimes trailers spoil. But yeah, I was expecting one Ray, and then to see the rest also come back. So yeah, it definitely, I think, would please fans in that regard to just see the familiar faces, the iconic faces of the Ghostbusters, and see them do their thing. That was really pleasing to me. What do you guys think in terms of nostalgia?
Oh, they did change it a lot. Like, the entire plot was similar, but with the characters and their whole dynamic, it was very different. It wasn't like they were actually scientists, like in the original, and they wanted to fight ghosts, which is something I didn't like. I thought they should have been a little more shocked that there were still ghosts in their environment. And it was interesting that they took the original plot and sort of did the same thing with it, just like in a more modern viewpoint with more modern effects, right?
Yeah.
The special effects were pretty good, right?
They were good. I thought even the special effects kind of retained that nostalgia feel to them because Ghostbusters as a sci-fi film, it's not particularly scary. Like, the ghosts are kind of not cute. I mean, there's a marshmallow, so they're kind of cute. Even with, all the advancements we've made in technology and such, I thought the film still retained kind of that, like, old quality feel in the ghosts.
Yeah, and I feel like a part of that, like, nostalgia factor in terms of, like, that sense that you're talking about is because the film actually used a lot of practical effects. And I think that's something that's very 80s in itself. It's very, like Sam Raimi, all of that type of stuff, right? And something that I read about was, like, how they use, like, a lot of wind, especially, and not, like, CGI. They use a lot of, like, wind turbines and, like, a truck that was literally just there for wind. And that kind of just adds on to, like, I really like how they maintain that practicality almost.
That's awesome. I love when a film, like, tries to keep the practical effects. I think that's great. I mean, even considering that the director is the son of the original director from the Ghostbusters movie. I mean, let's talk about, that's a lot. Those are big shoes to fill.
Yeah, your own father's shoes.
Yeah, so he did a good job. I mean, 65 is not a bad score. Well,
It's mediocre.
But, he did, with the CGI effects and practical effects and just the whole nostalgia feel, I thought it was great that the son, tried to retain his father's, like, techniques and such.
Yeah, and he's not all that bad. Like, I know him from directing Juno, and I think that was also a great movie by itself, but it's kind of interesting to see his take on, like, as you said, sci-fi and stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe it was more science fiction than the original, because the original was more, like, fantasy and fun, and this one felt like it was trying to be more, like, maybe like Stranger Things in a way. On that note, maybe making children main characters wasn't the best move. Maybe they were trying to appeal to a younger generation, but their main focus should have been trying to appeal to the people who had grown up with it.
Yeah.
And I feel like it might have been better if the characters in the film were older, because while it was very heartfelt that they were children and growing up and the connection with their mother, I didn't feel it as much as I would have if they were already adults.
Yeah, it's always a little quabble of mine as well. Like, with all the sequels we see coming out, and then also sequels that follow, let's say, the kid generation or, like, the children of the iconic characters we've come to know. So those are always, like, nitpicky things with me. So going to this knowing it was going to pander to the children and the teens that were going to see it instead of the original older audience. Again, like I said, like you mentioned, Aaleia, that's also kind of, I think, where the film kind of derailed a bit and could maybe lack on a bit just, you know, going to the kid route, you know.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's kind of necessary at some point, just because this is inherently a sequel,
Yeah.
and it's tying back to like bringing all of this like old nostalgia and for a new audience. But something I did that I feel like they did well actually was introducing these new characters in a way, like podcast, like very 21st century.
Podcast.
He was the best character.
He absolutely was. I loved him. His dialogue was genuinely so funny. I was laughing almost every time he talked.
Yeah.
And he was just a great character to have in the film. So kudos to Podcast. I loved him. But actually, speaking of dialogue, while Podcast had great dialogue, I think there are moments in the story that were a little flat.
Cringy. Yes.
I mean, okay, I have a big one. I don't know if you guys, this stuck out to you as well, but the scene where the mom and the teacher were both possessed by the demons, and then they were going to like solidify their union. Yeah, their union in like the desert. That dialogue and that scene kind of just was jarring to me, because I was with the whole, it was serious, a mix of serious nostalgia while also kind of comedic, and then that scene was just a little too silly for me.
Right. Like it would have fit better in the original, which they did do something similar to that. But with this one, it didn't fit the vibe of the rest of it.
It was just a little ridiculous, that one. But then otherwise, what do we think about like dialogue, plot, storyline?
Well, one line that I personally didn't like is when the girl, Phoebe, she said something like about her grandfather. She said, he likes science like me, and that was a little strange because her character was a little flat. I felt like maybe a little too stereotypical, like, yeah, we get it, it's a girl who likes science and that's something that we want to encourage, but it was almost a little too much.
Yeah, like the stereotypical, like, I don't need other kids, like, I'm on my own vibe.
Like sometimes I feel like the character of Phoebe, she was kind of alienated a little too much so that she could have a better dynamic with Paul Rudd's character, which I mean is understandable. At the same time, it kind of leads me to wonder, like, just because she is super into science, does that mean like the entire plot has to revolve around that? Because I could have sworn there were like 3 different times where it was mentioned.
Yeah, it was definitely like constantly like hounded that like she was into science, and at the beginning like she didn't really need anyone else until she met Podcast, and then so on and so forth. So yeah, I agree in the sense that her character did kind of feel a little flat to me as well. But I mean, what do we think of her brother? Oh, what's his name? Trevor? His character. I mean, his side plot, I'm trying to reflect and think back on the relevance in totality to the whole plot.
Right. I didn't like how within like the first half hour of the film they paired up all the characters. And that was really annoying to me because it's like, also that girl who he liked, in my opinion, served no purpose. She was like the 4th Ghostbuster.
She came out of nowhere. I'm sorry. She literally came out of absolutely nowhere.
I'm trying to like recall like the exact significance of her character and not coming up blank.
She shot something at the end.
She shot something at the end.
Something.
Okay.
She got possessed that one time.
That one time she got possessed.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, she did move forward the brother's character in a way.
That's true.
So that was a purpose, but I mean, it was just a little awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a little like, as you were saying, like flat, because if this is going to be picked up by like the same director and it's going to be using like the same characters for another sequel, which they do hint at the end, it's kind of like we need a little bit more about her, and she needs to be a little bit more fleshed out and like developed.
Yeah. So yeah, in some regards, I think the character interactions were kind of lacking, but I did appreciate parts that did tie back again to the original Ghostbuster, Egon specifically, and that's where I think like as a sequel it really like shines from going back to its roots with the whole Egon plot and his daughter. I think the grandchildren was kind of, like we said, were kind of flat with their characters, but I think the daughter relationship with Egon, and then even at the end when Egon's ghost comes back and then we have the whole like emotional moment with Egon and his granddaughter, I just think the Ghostbusters themselves were the heart of the film, and just all that nostalgia. Definitely. Like we said.
And in a way, maybe that made it good that they didn't really have more of an original take on it, that they did stick to it, because in a way it was passing the torch to the new generation, and in that way maybe it was better with the kids rather than making it adult characters.
Yeah, I know. And like speaking of like returning figures and whatnot, something that I really liked was the score. It had that really like 80s feel to it, and like that sonic kind of vibe. And something that I noticed like later on, I looked back at it, but whoever was like composing this, I believe his name, I forgot his name, but the original composer's son actually was there as a score consultant.
Really?
For the composer of this movie. So I think that just really helped and ties in, and it shows that they're going the extra mile for this nostalgia factor and this fan servicing. So I think it's actually pretty good in that sense.
Yeah, I really like that. I think while some critics may have had a problem with fan servicing, I think in the end, I mean, it's a classic, it's Ghostbusters. I feel like fan servicing really can't kill the movie as much as like some may believe. I think really, as when I was walking out of the film and looking back, as someone who watched Ghostbusters when I was a kid, I just feel like Ghostbusters, the originals, and just the fan service, it's what like really like solidifies it as a good throwback, as a good sequel that follows the originals.
And hopefully maybe that ended that whole series, and I would be satisfied if this was the last one in the Ghostbusters.
I would be satisfied too, which is why I'm a little upset. There's a hint at the end credit scene that they're gonna keep going.
Well, let's hope that maybe they end it there. Well, Nameera, was your opinion changed at all by this?
No, we're pretty dead on what I was thinking. 65 was where I was at, still up there. 63 is a little low, but than like my original thought, but it's just right about that same ballpark, and for good reason. I mean, we're kind of fleshing it out here.
Yeah, I think my opinion was changed slightly. I think I can see where it definitely fell flat in some areas, and I would lower my own guess. I don't know still if I would go 65, but maybe high 70s, I would say. But yeah, definitely I see the negatives.
I would say low 70s. I'm so sorry.
But I think that we can all agree that they did really try on this, and
yeah,
they did a good job with it. And
I think they did
was a good film.
Yeah.
And maybe it had its problems, but with the nostalgia factor, I think it deserves a higher score than they did give it.
Yeah, I agree. I think with the effort they obviously put in to, you know, give a respectful nod to their thought, like the consultants, the sons that were on set with making this film, I agree. I think they did their best. I think it was a good film.
I think Jason Reitman will have many more movies to come, at the very least.
He definitely is a good filmmaker, great filmmaker, and I'm also excited to see what he comes out with next.
We hope you enjoyed our episode on Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Remember to subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify,
and most importantly, rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
Thanks for tuning in. Bye.
Bye-bye.